So yeah, our next speaker is Alexandrova.
Greetings, colleagues and friends. Major case of FOMO here, listening to how much fun you're having. But I wanted to especially thank the colleagues at MCPS, not just for putting on a conference that is, potentially field-changing and extremely important, but also for making it so accessible audio-visually. It's been so brilliant to tune in with no problems and be able to listen to both the questions and the speakers, both yesterday and today. I do realize that a lot of work behind the scenes ensured that, and I'm extremely grateful. So my remarks will be without slides, and also I have to wave my hands so that the lights don't come off. And they'll be about social sciences. So that's a bit like Joel Isaac yesterday, no slides and about social sciences. So it's a wonderful honor to speak in such a remarkable lineup and to be asked to speak about the present. But as any philosopher of time will tell you, it's really hard to know how long the present is. So I really hope that it's okay to start about 25 years ago. And I do promise that I'm getting to present in the sense of today. And second, I will also take the opportunity to be a little bit personal in my remarks. And hang on, it won't be all as navel-gazing, but it'll be some. So the first time I encountered philosophy in an academic setting was at London School of Economics in 1998. The course was called Philosophy of Social Science. And this degree no longer exists, but it made a profound impression on me, because this is where I first heard the questions such as, were economists right to recommend liberalization of Russian economy? Is there genuine expertise about the social world? And does anyone ever really explain big social transformations, or do they only tell pleasing stories about it? I was a post-Soviet youth, so big social transformations and experts talking about it on TV was really all I ever knew. So falling for philosophy of social science was for me akin to the phenomenon of imprinting. No other field gripped me as much before and none since. What I didn't know was that while at LSE these questions were normal for philosophers to ask, elsewhere they were hardly considered philosophy at all. So when I arrived to UC San Diego for graduate school, my interests suddenly began to look marginal. And indeed, marginal was the word that one of my teachers used when I described to him what I wanted to do. It was not core philosophy, he said, in a caring but a matter-of-fact way. I shall need a strategy for positioning myself if I really want to do it. So this is where my remarks begin to overlap a little bit with Janet Stemvedel, who uncovered so effectively in her remarks the toxicity of that kind of thinking and how easily it penetrates. Light on. So thankfully, before I sold my soul by positioning myself into core philosophy, Nancy Cartwright arrived for winter quarter, and she wasn't going to hear any of that nonsense. She told me that philosophy of social science is the future of philosophy, in that many words, and that I need to hunker down and actually do it well instead of wringing my hands about positioning. And so I did. But looking back, I think I still did it very cautiously. I shelved the big questions that so gripped me at LSE and wrote a dissertation on the use of game theory in mechanism design, auction design. I loved researching that topic, but it was still a cautious move because the nature of models and inference from them was a solid topic in general philosophy of science. So I could position myself as a philosopher of science who just happened to think about cases in economics and political science. And it is much harder to tell a philosopher like this that they're marginal. This strategy served me well. And I want to give a particular shout out to the role of Minneapolis in this. In 2005, I gave a talk in your department at an event organized by two powers of nature that are Katie Pleasance and the late, great Evelyn Fox Keller. Holly Anderson was there too, and we shared a room. So the best part was that Katie got Helen Longino to give comments on my paper, and Helen picked on perhaps kind of the wackiest point in my paper and said, that's worthwhile. And I just felt my wings grow. Yeah, that's for the lights, not for the wings. So little by little, I ventured out further afield towards other questions in philosophy of social science. How does social science approach concepts that are value-laden, like well-being? How can we justify quantification of complex and multidimensional phenomena? What makes a field of science socially responsible and policy relevant? And I was not alone in these interests, and questions that originated in social sciences quickly became the mainstay of major conferences in our field, such as the PSA. And another shout out to first meeting Carol Lee at one event like this and feeling extraordinary kinship because of her interests in social sciences of science. So, philosophy of social science moved from being marginal to gradually gaining legitimacy and centrality in the larger ecosystem of philosophy of science. But what I want to argue now is that inclusion of social sciences enriched our fields in at least three ways. It improved our understanding of costs and benefits of idealized models. It improved our understanding of the role of values in science and the challenges of measurement and quantification. And the point is, it's not just in and of itself that it's nice to pay attention to social sciences. It makes all the rest of philosophy of science better as well. So first, on the costs and benefits of idealized models, topic that Angela Potocznik covered so well in her remarks. I'll be brief in that case. So economics relies on choice models centrally with great social consequences, and philosophy of economics long organized itself around analyzing how they work. But philosophizing about economic models in themselves makes very little sense because these models are so similar to models in ecology and population biology. They're all deductive, they're all idealized, and they all come with a causal interpretation eventually. And almost everything you say about one, you can say about the other as well. So it's a really good thing that nowadays these discussions are unified and we discuss issues of robustness of these models, inference from them, justification of idealizations, not relative to a specific discipline like economics and biology, but together. I'm very thankful to the colleagues who made it possible by editing special issues of journals and encouraging philosophers of biology and philosophers of economics to talk to each other, as well as the relevant scientists. So this matters to me because for a long time, and this is where it might get a bit more controversial, I think the discussion of modeling in philosophy has been done far too deferentially towards existing practices in science. Just because a scientist says that a model gives them a perspective on a phenomenon is not in itself a justification yet. We also need to consider the opportunity costs of modeling. In particular, we need to consider opportunity costs of the choice to study phenomena by means of such models. the choice to center education of new scientists around modeling, and the choice to select the new generation of new scientists around models, around their ability to produce models rather than their ability to do, say, sensitive field work. And I hope, because such questions are more easy to ask of economists, I hope this will become, in general, a model for philosophers of modeling elsewhere. So now let me go to role of values, where I think also attending to social science has made a big difference. Now, rightly a huge topic in philosophy of science, thank goodness. My point is that social sciences added some much needed complexity and nuance to this discussion. It is tempting, due to the powerful influence of people like Heather Douglas, who is in the audience, how wonderful, feminist philosophers like Helen Longino, Philip Kitcher, to focus on values as either judgments of inductive risk, sources of bias, or judgments about research priorities. But social sciences deal with thick concepts, and these do not fit in any of the categories above. So thick concepts like development, inflation, colonialism, quality of life, they are unusual because values are constitutive of the object of research, such that the phenomenon still just simply would not be identifiable without values. Moreover, when you look closely, this is not at all a peculiarity of the social sciences, and I wish this was clearer. I think especially back to a paper by a short passage in Ernst Nagel's Structure of Science in 1962, in which he talks about how this is not at all, having value-laden concepts is not at all special to social sciences. And he discusses anemia in that in such a clear-headed way. But because his interlocutors are mostly like librarians who want to keep sort of driving this specialness of social science line, the message, I think, gets lost through the ages. So thick concepts are very central to medicine, life, environmental sciences. You can think of sustainability, frailty, biodiversity, and arguably the very idea of health and disease. And thick concepts raise profound challenging to measurement, to theory building, to explanation. On the theory building and explanation side, they're challenging because you want to think about whether thick concepts deserve a role as just explananda or explanans, or both. On the measurement side and theory building side, or actually also, you want to think at what point in the process of measure development, and that means theory development as well, the value judgments about that the concepts begin to enter, who is supposed to make them, and how widely this value judgment is supposed to hold, given that scientific tools are prized by their exportability to other contexts. So keeping thick concepts part of a big picture is absolutely crucial to showing the work of values, the values do in science generally, not just in the social sciences. And now let me talk about measurement and quantification. I think it's really remarkable that in the Anglophone analytic tradition, measurement does not become the core topic, right? I don't know what happened historically. It probably got discussed yesterday, and I'm really glad that work of Paul Meehl was brought up. But it is still the case that measurement is not even in the recent philosophy of science textbooks a chapter. You'll be lucky if you find it in the index. I think it's remarkable for such a central activity. And to the extent that it is discussed, the focus has been on representational theory of measurement with its logic of connecting axioms to observation and coordination between theorizing a phenomenon and measuring it. But in social sciences, measurement faces additional challenges. And I think that came out nicely in Carol Lee's remarks about how measurement is often a multidimensional affair, and it matters a great deal how you weigh different components of a measure. So much of social measurement is driven by surveys or opinion polls, and the outcomes are either ratings or social indicators like GDP, a human development index, quality of life. So these are both powerful and very, very puzzling. And that is because they rely on a notion of validity and the process of validation. And I think philosophers of science have been sort of asleep on the job without providing proper accounts to that. Scientists have stepped in themselves, especially some psychometricians, and they did it sometimes very well. But there is still this mode of turning measurement into a flow chart. And we know that a flow chart, that serves the goals of training and simplifying things for passing on the tasks, but it's not a justification and it's not a philosophy, it's a flowchart. So what are the big questions there? Is it okay to quantify ordinal information? Should multiple indicators be combined into a single scale? What is lost and what is found that way? And what is validity anyway, right? These questions are only just beginning to be tackled by philosophers of social sciences and medicine, and I really appreciate that, and I won't drop names, but I could. But the answers are still up for grabs, and it's just that once we figure out those answers, the lessons will hold far beyond social sciences, because this type of measurement is essential, absolutely central to medical and environmental sciences as well, where a combination of dimensions into a single indicator is often the most interesting and controversial part. So I hope this shows that making social science less marginal is good for philosophers of all the sciences, not just in and of itself. And my expectation is that this trend will continue. So I'll give you just two more examples to show that prediction Nancy Cartwright made is true, or at least I'm enacting it to be true. One is the one that already came up in Carol's talk and was addressed so well in the Q&A just now about meta-science. I suppose, let me add something that I wasn't able to say because I'm not there. I think of phenomena of meta-science, open science, and the so-called credibility revolution is not so much, sort of big epistemic trends. I mean, they are sciences, they say they're sciences, but they really are social movements. Social movements in the sense that there is first kind of a big vocal minority that exposes failures of integrity in their field, and then undertakes to convince the majority that science needs new norms, new institutions to get past various crises, be it replication, poor causal inference, failure of forecasts. So sometimes the ideas that are proposed are right, sometimes they are wrong. There are fascinating controversies abound on this front. Yes, so to hark back to the Q&A of the previous presentation, I would, the way Carol put it is we need to embrace meta-science as a field in which philosophy of science can specialize. I would think I would go stronger. Meta-science is going to be a huge and expensive failure if we don't. It is the new turf of the demarcation problem, and to that extent, we need to get on that turf ASAP. Moreover, these controversies should not be tackled just with epistemology because they concern how communities can organize themselves in a healthy and productive ways. So that's the business of, again, social sciences and political theory. Lots and lots to do. Sorry, I am having trouble staying within present right now. I'm talking about the future as well, but forgive me. For a long time, the second point, and that again goes back to Janet's excellent presentation. So for a long time, the hallmark of a successful PSA symposium has been a participation of a scientist alongside some philosophers of science. We've come to be extremely sort of self-congratulatory about including scientists, and we've come to identify this model with a philosophy of science that's properly relevant and connected. And that has got to change for all the reasons that Janet pointed out. The stakeholders of science are many more. And the stakeholders of philosophy of science are also the practitioners, the users, and the citizens on the other end of evidence-based practices. Why? Because they have expertise that's often implicit, hidden, discounted, and yet absolutely essential to the healthy role of science in our communities. Because that's a lesson largely out of study of evidence-based policy and healthcare, it is potentially transformative, nevertheless, for philosophy of science in general, philosophy of science that includes social sciences properly. So I think social sciences are good here because they force us to rethink our publics, the publics of our discipline, and to broaden it from just the usual suspects. So far I've argued that demarginalizing social sciences improves philosophy of science as a whole. And I don't have that much more to say, except allow me to return a little bit again to the personal bit. So for me, here there is a deep lesson that I'm only just beginning to grapple with, and that it takes me back to the questions that I started with at LSE in 1990s, where my teachers first posed this big question of whether social science is a separate, special category of knowledge with a distinct subject matter that deserves the name of science. I now have a privilege to return to it with blissfully little care how marginal it looks, and thankfully it no longer looks that marginal. But just because it's not marginal, it's not resolved. So I'll just come out and say what I think. I do not believe that social sciences are special in either their epistemology or metaphysics as compared to natural sciences. They might be special, sort of each little social science problem, it might be special in the sense that everybody is special, but they're not special with respect to natural sciences. Now, in the past, that would have made me what's called naturalist. And at yesterday's talk, Joel Isaac nicely complicated that category. Naturalists are those who believe that social science could be like natural science. Last decades of our field showed that there isn't anything natural sciences are like, and in which case naturalism is a no-go. So if neither anti-naturalism nor naturalism is a go, what was the category of social science to begin with? It must have been a historical convention. It must have been disciplinary politics. It must have been just a category that was born out of the necessity to fight for air next to the established categories of natural sciences and humanities. It must have been a category that served particular goals then, but it may not be a category that if we had started building our knowledge organization from scratch again, we would have adopted. So I find it both satisfying and unsettling that in returning to my roots and asserting my identity as a philosopher of social science, I both kind of undermine the grounds for marginalization that gave me so much anxiety as a young woman, but also undo whatever glue held together the very idea of social science. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for that really insightful talk, and I'm glad that you survived. As a psychologist, I'm glad you made it. I'm very interested in your question or your comment that philosophers of science don't really pay much attention to the problem of measurement in social sciences because theoretical and philosophical psychologists, I don't know if you've heard this term, but yes, you have, good, of which I am one, have spent lifetimes bashing so-called mainstream psychology as if there's one monolithic mainstream instead of individual research projects, which are never talked about. It's just tarred with the brush of mainstream for measuring what can't be measured, namely mental entities of any sort. Joel Michel, who you probably heard of at the University of Sydney, has spent his life arguing against the logic of measurement, of statistical measurement, of, quantitative any sort of ordinal categories, like intelligence and personality and so forth. My question has to do with the bulk of my field, which bashes the mainstream for their eliminativism, and I'm interested, and I'm writing about Ernst Nagel in his anti-eliminativism view, that quantitative measurement loses the subject in both senses, the subject of psychology and the subject of personhood. That as soon as you start using numbers, you're not talking about psychology anymore. You're not talking about persons. You have reduced them to something that is meaningless. You look like you've heard this, and it's reductionistic. Anytime a number enters, it's reductionistic. So the positivists interest me here because Nagel was not about eliminativism, but all these theoretical and philosophical psychologists, to the extent that there are many, most of them, I've been fighting against them my whole career. Could you speak to that problem?
Thank you so
Thank
much. Great. I would have loved to talk to you more. I think if we're going to make progress on these questions, we need to get past these rather simple dichotomies between the measurable and the unmeasurable, the quantitative and the qualitative, the personal and the physical. The story of measurement is a story of quantifying the unquantifiable. And that happened across physical sciences, across life sciences. And when it happens it can happen better or worse in the social sciences and including in psychology. And I think it is really, I think it is a mistake of Michel to try and come up with sort of metaphysical reasons that are once and for all insurmountable. But you're absolutely right that philosophy of science hasn't got a good story about what it means to surmount the challenge of quantification and how we can do it better. Very brief answer to a very big question.
Thank you for the talk. I think this is really an important issue, and I want to push you further in the direction you're wanting to go, because it seems to me that one of the things that the earlier talks has been emphasizing is broadening our conception of philosophy of science more generally as we turn from looking at traditional questions about the structure of knowledge and of evidence and models to scientific practices. that issues in social theory, philosophy of social science, and so forth become constitutive for our field and not merely one more subdiscipline. And of course, the other point, which I think you rightly made, is that we can't really think about that without also connecting it to philosophy of biology. So this is really more a comment, but would you be inclined in that direction to really see much, of the work in social theory as well as philosophy of the social sciences as becoming more constitutive of what it is to do philosophy of science as we go forward?
Thank you. You put it so well. Absolutely. So long as it still remains about knowledge, is the answer.
Hello, this is Holly. It's nice to see you up on the screen. So thank you so much. I wanted to sort of ask you about some of the things that you said about measurement at the end, because I really like this idea that you don't have to make the social sciences be like the natural sciences, because the natural sciences are this sort of lionized or heroized thing that you should aspire towards, but that there isn't this sort of distinction between them going the other direction. And so the representational theory of measurement stuff is, I think, some of it is interesting, but it also, I worry, contains this kind of, still this seed of like axiomatic reconstruction, where you treat the natural sciences measurement process in this kind of idealized reconstructive way that isn't what people are doing often. And so I was just wondering if you have, looking at the way in which the modeling and measurement takes place in the social sciences, is there any particular area there that would be more helpful for people in the natural sciences to look towards for something that they could draw on?
Great, thank you, Holly. So I don't see the representational theory of measurement as embodying the natural science ideal of measurement at all. I mean, Pat Supis develops it with Amos Tversky, right? And the goal is always psychology. Now, psychologists in the audience may think that was a blind alley. But what never left, and what we never, what they got right, is that whenever you assign a numerical structure to a phenomenon, you have to justify that numerical structure somehow. You could justify it via the axiomatic route. If you don't have the axiomatic route, if you can't prove the representation theorems as they did, you have to find other ways of doing it. And a lot of, the story of construct validity in the social sciences and more generally is an attempt to replace the need for axioms, sometimes more or less well. I think if there is something really big to learn and to attend to here, is that the story of measurement in the social sciences is a story of attempts to provide flowcharts and provide rules for how to do it. And then also stick in quite a lot of different exceptions that are less visible. And it's also a way, I'm frustrated about the elimination of kind of theory from process of validation. The attempt to represent it as a series of rules, and we philosophers know a lot about how complex theorizing is, and I hope that we just sort of go and look at validation and show it how it could be done better. And like the big philosophical question that is raised here, which shows that we're all in the same boat, is goes back to Hilary Putnam. Hilary Putnam criticizes Popper for an attempt to say what the method is of science, without attending to the content of science. So to specify the rules without specifying what the rules apply to, right? Quite a lot of the mistakes, I think, in the process of validations go back to that fundamental ambition. And that's a line that we're still learning to walk, right? To what extent we can come up with, a theory of causation, irrespective of what is doing the causing. or a theory of probability divorced from the chances in a specific case. A measurement is just an embodiment of that very same dilemma. So we just need to, write it into our textbooks and make it part of our standard conversation.
Final question?
Hi, Marshall Abrams. This is sort of a follow-up on Holly's question in one sense and more on Joe Rouse's question. It's about, so you said, well, there's not really any difference between social sciences and natural sciences. But one thing you have in social sciences that you don't have in, say, evolutionary biology are people who are doing less quantitative research, and you've got participant observation and various sorts of hermeneutical endeavors in anthropology and sociology and sometimes other areas. And this, my view is this kind of research in social sciences is, in some sense, it's less reliable, but it can give us insights about very complex systems, humans, that quantitative results struggle to get at. I mean, and that's part of what what measurement is about, is trying to get at this sort of underlying factors, but it's always going to leave out some complexity. And so I guess I'm just be interested in you saying something about this kind of more humanistic social science, and whether it's science at all, whether it means social science is different from natural sciences and so on. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Marshall. You're only going to think that this is different if you already thought that humans are exceptional and don't fit in nature. But there really isn't that much difference between a really careful field worker who is sensitive to the organisms that she's examining, Barbara McClintock, and a really good participant observer who is learning the rules by which a community operates. A lot of these distinctions between the nature of the social come out of human exceptionalism, and thinking that we are so very different that the rules of knowing us are just dramatically different. They're not that different unless you already believed that humans are different. So the use of empathy and empathetic understanding is completely crucial in comparative psychology and in any animal studies. I am trying to help us, to push us to see fieldwork in a wider way. And so I suppose I'll push back on your claim that there really is something special, but that's not quite as reliable. Well, nothing is quite reliable, really. And we do best when we triangulate and when we maximize our sources of evidence that speak to each other, something that Nancy Cartwright in her recent book calls the tangle. And within that tangle, there are no distinctions for methods that are applicable to humans and methods that are not. That's my view.
Okay, let's thank Anna again.